Welcome to Level Up and Live, the podcast where we explore the secrets to thriving relationships and personal growth. I'm your host, Sean Myers, joined by my co-host, Ewan Heinemeyer. And today, we're diving into a crucial topic: why you should never take your spouse for granted. Join us as we uncover strategies to strengthen your connection and nurture your partnership. Learn how prioritizing your relationship can lead to greater happiness and fulfillment for both you and your spouse. Get ready to transform your relationship and level up and live.
Happy wife, happy life. It's a saying, I don't know, I've heard it 100 times over the last 5 years. I don't know if that has been a saying for, forever, but I just feel like I've heard it so many times and it's almost kind of gotten numbed out. Oh, happy life, happy wife, happy wife, happy life. And, but the more I think about that, the truer and truer it gets. Whether it's your business, a sport you play, your other relationships, your friends, your business, your job. If your relationship with your wife is not good, everything else is impacted. There's just no version of you not having a good relationship with your wife and everything else being great, because who do you come home to? Who do you sleep next to in your bed at night? Who do you experience the highs and the lows with? Your wife, right? I'm talking from a man's perspective, and for women, it is your husband, right? Like your husband is there, so it's the most important relationship that we'll have physically here on this planet. And today we just thought it was such a big important topic to discuss that I wanted to dive in. I've worked very hard on my marriage, and I will just say right now, I've been a terrible husband at times, right? And Sean, I think you would say, hey, there was some work to be done at certain
Agreed.
points.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah, and to me, here's what I want to say is that if you had asked me 10 years ago, are you a good husband? I'm like, I'm a great husband. Just ask my wife; she'll tell you. And if you had asked her, she probably would have said, yes, he's a great husband. But I don't think there might have been a hint of sadness in the back of her mind. You know what I mean? Without her even possibly knowing that. Right? Because there's elements that I have realized myself over time that I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was doing that. I didn't see this. I thought I was good there. And I just wasn't. I remember like realizing these things as I went. It's like a punch in the stomach. Like, oh my goodness, I am horrible at that. Right? And so over the last, and now I'll also caveat, I am no expert at this yet. I'm not some husband guru, but over the last 18 months to 24 months, I've really honed in on what am I missing? That's the question I ask the most. Where am I not showing up for my wife? Because I have to ask, because I'm not innately knowing. Do you know what I'm talking about, Sean? Like, do you resonate with what I'm saying?
Yeah, you don't want to keep talking for the next 20 minutes, man, because I'm loving this, brother. You're on fire, man.
I'm pouring my soul out here, but
Preaching.
that's all, vulnerability. This only helps by sharing, right? Because what I've noticed for myself, I'm like, dang, what other wives are going through this, right? What other husbands think they're the best husbands right now, putting their hand up. Oh, I'm a great husband. I go talk to their wife. Give me 5 minutes with their wives, and I'll be able to tell them, like, I'll find out real fast that guy is completely oblivious, totally doesn't know what's going on, thinks he's a good. And here's the thing: it's not deliberate. I won't say this isn't like some malicious attack. It is that men in general we're very self-conscious, right? We're very selfish, not in the mean sense, but we just think about ourselves. We're number one. Our wives support us. Think about that statement right there. I hear that so many times. Oh, my wife supports me. Man, that is a major indicator that you might not be who you think you are in your relationship, right? Because your wife is not a supporting role. She is a main character. She is the main character. And a good leader, good husband should be the supporting role for the whole family, right? But it doesn't work like that. You look at the 50s, man goes out to work, woman stays at home and looks after children, does the cooking, man makes all the decisions, right? Like that's the stereotypical. And that is just, I think, could be hell on earth for a wife. And look at that, right? So the husband is not living the best that he could be living because the wife is not truly engaged, not truly happy, because the husband is not leading from a place of raising everybody up as opposed to serve me, look after me, I'm number one, right? And I've talked a lot, Sean, so you You say something.
Man, you hit the nail right on the head, and great intro on that. And I thought a couple of things, and one of the things, this podcast, right? It's level up and live. It's not stay stagnant, stay complacent. And to me, it's like in these different areas of life, in relationships, spirituality, they're one and connected. And so one of the things that I have realized about myself is here in the last decade of building a business, building team members, building up other people, even my wife in general, is we've been so focused on everybody else, right? And these 5 key components that we're going to go over today that I feel like talking behind the scenes with you, Ewan, are something that I challenge myself with, something that I struggle with, and something that I consider not only setbacks, but they're obstacles as well, because I don't naturally show up this way. And like you said, I've had to put in the work. I've had to,
Mhm.
here's the key word, be intentional
Yes.
about these 5 things that we're going to be sharing today. And the first one is communication. See, communication, where focus goes, energy flows. And one of the things that I've always struggled with over the years is effective communication. And the funny thing is, here recently, I've even tried to level up even more. I've even tried YouTubing effective communication and
Oh, I love
how
it.
to, yeah, dive deep. It's funny because your ears just lit up. You want to go, you want to dive into that, don't you,
I
Ewan?
do, dude. I really do.
But
Next
effective
episode.
communication. And there's always things to be worked on because we only have 24 hours in the day. And it's like, what are we doing with that time? And if you was to ask me 2 years ago what I was doing with my time, I was reading personal development books. I was reading how to market, how to sell, how to grow a business, right? What other time was I left focusing on my spouse? What other time was left with learning how to effectively communicate with my spouse, and not be reactive and be proactive in situations where we're angry, lonely, tired? I wasn't prepared. I wasn't equipped. I didn't have the tools, the resources when these times arise, and they did. It's not if, but when, right? And so that's what happened to me is I struggled for up until about 2 years ago, where I was like, dude, I'm up against the wall. Sure, these other areas of my life are optimizing in their health and fitness, and building a business, but man, there is some disconnect between me and my wife. And so who do I need to become? Where do I need to surround myself with? Who do I need to surround myself with? And who do I need to reach out to? Where do I need to plug myself into? And I was asking myself these questions because it's like we talked about in our title, right? In our word copy is that, with, like you said earlier, Ewan, if the relationship uh is not good. I was going to say okay, right? That complacency, I feel like
Mm,
the word okay is just not,
yeah. Okay is
I'm not,
terrible.
it's okay, it's terrible, right? And so I'm like, if it's not improving, if it's not working on deepening that connection, then there's a problem. That's a red flag. And that's the way I look at it. So I'm like, how can I improve? Who do I need to become? And what I soon realized 2 years ago is like, I am way off the beaten
Mm,
path.
mm,
And this is not okay. My stomach was sick. And if to society and everybody that had asked me, like, oh, how's the relationship? Oh, it's good. And it's funny because even people to this day, Ewan, we hear it all the time in our community. How's your relationship? Oh, it's good.
yep.
Right. I'm like, I said the same thing. But that's just a surface level answer. If you really dive deep, right? The intimacy, the communication, the active listening, these things that we're going to be going today, really assess yourself, because man, I wish I would have assessed myself a lot deeper in these 5 key components. Prior to 2 years ago, I've been married to Kendra for 12 plus years. Together for 12 years, married for 6. What if I would have started doing this 12 years ago, right?
Yes.
Where we would be today.
Yes. Well, in communication, so we're not going to give a master class on communication today, but this is a just check yourself episode with your spouse, right? Husband and wife, right? And wife, think about how you show up for your husband too, right? But with communication, there's a surefire indicator. There's certain topics that if you can't talk about without it going south very quickly, there's a communication breakdown. That is an indicator you're not able to, let's say it's money, right? Money is a surefire, like I think they say that's the number one reason for divorce. Like people just don't know how to communicate over money because people feel restricted. Well, it's just a lack of communicating, because everybody wants the best, right, for their finances. Everybody wants the best for their children. whatever it is, if whatever they're communicating about, and who knows what it is, if it ends up in harsh tone or raised voices, communication issue, right? There's something to be looked at there. So if you're experiencing that in your relationship, I know I do. If I start raising up, I go away and think to myself, I didn't. I can't control what she's going to do. I can only control what I do, how I respond, how I
100%.
communicate with her. And if I level up, the hope is that she will too, and she always does, right? Because we have that understanding, and I know you guys you do that too with Kendra, So yeah, communication, it all starts there. Nothing happens without it. So okay, so you communicate. What is some of the key elements to good communication? That leads to our point two, which is active listening,
Mm.
right? So there's hearing, and then there's listening. Hearing is, they say whatever they're saying just so you can get your turn to talk. And it's a surefire way to lose. Hand up. I do it all the time. My brain thinks very fast. I think I know what people are going to say. P.S. Fellas, don't pretend, don't act like you know what your wife's about to say, because you can't possibly know. You could be 99% correct. You might even be correct. Might. But might's not good enough. What if you're wrong? What if you're wrong the vast majority of the time? You're constantly messing up what you think she's trying to say. So you're already trying to respond to what you think she's trying to do. So it's active listening. What is she really trying to say? What is the tone? Where is she actually trying to go with saying that thing that she just said? What is she really trying to tell you? Is she frustrated? Is she confused? Is she scared? Right? So she might be saying, you blah 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 blah, right? But really, what is she saying when she's pointing a finger saying you, right? She's trying to communicate something, right? So active listening. And I know you've done a lot of that, Sean, right? Like I know you've spent time on it. Like how do you do it?
Yeah, it's been super tough, man, because I'm one of those individuals, like, I'm trying to, and you haven't said it yet, but solve the problem, right? As
Yes.
soon as
Oh,
I hear, I'm
yeah.
like,
So that's what men do. Give me a hammer. I'll hit that nail.
I got you. I solved the problem. And that's one of the things that I've really had to be, again, use the word intentional, right?
Yes.
And so when I start active listening, one of the things I use this term and this wordage a lot is poise and humble and in the pocket. I like using in the pocket and thinking about Tom Brady. When Tom Brady takes that snap, what makes him so great, right? Well, he's coming back in the pocket. He's got all these big guys, 200, 300, 400-pound guys coming at him, right? He's his world not World Series, that's baseball, World Championship or Super
The
Bowl,
Super
Super
Bowl.
Bowl.
I
Think
love
about
it.
High
How
Rocks.
much you don't know or care about sports because you're too busy living your life. I love it.
But I study Tom Brady. I study people that do it
Yeah.
great, right? And so he remains poised, humble, calm. Well, how does he do that, right? It's because of a number of reasons, right? He's focused. He's in his head. He's being intentional about it. He's making it a priority. He's focused on his breathing, and he's done the work behind the scenes. I look at it the same way. When my wife's talking, and my wife is very strong. She's got a very strong personality. I'm not just talking to somebody that's on the opposite spectrum of that. I'm
Mhm.
a strong personality. She's a strong personality. Well, if you know anything about strong personalities, when they're around each other, we build each other up or we tear each other down. Simple
Mhm.
as that. We
Which way
can
do you want
either
to go?
Yeah, exactly. Which way do you want to go? It's not in the middle. It's either north or south. And so when I listen to her and I'm like, oh, I can solve this problem, right? I've had to really work on it, man, and go slow, calm down, poise, focus on my breathing, and search the North Star here, right? Like, Sean, you've been here, you've been in this moment. It's time to execute. You need to active listen. You need to listen to what she's saying, receive it, tell her, repeat it, mirror it back. So what I'm hearing you say, babe, is this. And then as soon as I mirror what she said, automatically I can see her just drop a little bit,
I
right?
want to just add in before you continue. There is what you just said right there is what I'm hearing you say is you do that so well, you do that so often, because that's a perfect way to clarify if you're on the money or not. Because a lot of the times, like, well, no, that's what you heard, but that's not what I actually was trying to say. I was trying to say this. I
Yes.
see. Thanks for checking in. Thanks for letting me, because I misheard. Then, as opposed to, well, I heard you say this and blah blah blah. You're saying, so what I heard you say was
Yes.
this. Is that correct? Is that accurate? No, it's not accurate. Oh, well, help me understand more. Oh, yeah, that is accurate. Thanks, man. People, I'm sure she feels heard and understood, right? Like, which is beautiful. So yeah, that would be one of the key, like, tactical things that everyone. I've heard you do it, and I'm trying to do it more myself. But what I heard you say was those words right there are super important. But yeah, keep going.
It just keeps me grounded, right? Having a strategy and that's what I would encourage and that's what helped me, right? Because before that, our communication was all over the place, right? And we didn't have the tools, we didn't have the resources, we didn't have the tips and the tricks and these different types of strategies, right? Early and often. And we would just blow up. We would just escalate, and we would just, gasoline and fire. And so now being able to go to these, right? And what it does is it brings the resting heart rate down, right? It can go from 120, 130 and it can bring it back
Yes.
down to 100. And let's have an adult, poised, humble conversation right now. And I'm the leader in the marriage. I've got to show up like this way. And maybe, somebody listening to this was where I was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and, tried everything in the book. Well, then to me, it's like you got to take a step back and it's like, okay, and then at that point, because for me, it was my tone, right? It's like, oh, I can say this, but how's my tone? How's my body language right now? That was another thing, Ewan, is like, what is my body language? Like, you can active listen all day long and mirror, but if you're sitting here
like this, aggressive,
exactly,
you bowed up.
Yep.
it's gonna, because we're bigger, right? Especially with the wives, like we're intimidating. They couldn't overpower us, right? So there's a certain element that's unsaid, like, okay, even if they win this argument, like there's always going to be that factor. So I think body language is huge.
Yeah. And one of the things that I thought about, and before we move on to this next one, is we went through this. You'd brought it up before we started the podcast. We went through this. It was about 2 years ago. And I was like, all right, enough's enough. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. All these other areas of my life, I've been able to bring up the baseline, be the best, become the best version of myself. How do I become the best version of myself, a husband in my marriage, right? Well, I don't know all the answers. I had to reach out for help, just like we preach, just like we teach, right? And so I had to reach out for help. This was uncomfortable for me, man. There was uncertainty. I was uncomfortable, and I struggled being around and sharing my issues and my problems with other people. What I soon realized, Ewan, is that I wasn't alone. Everybody's experiencing the similar issues.
Doesn't matter your personality type. It doesn't matter who is who. It's one human being being with another human being a lot, right? That's going to cause issues no matter what. Jesus had people constantly like arguing with him, like trying to get him. You know what I mean? This is Jesus we're talking about. So if people are showing up like that around him, okay, we're all gonna have issues. Of course, he handled it well, but he's our example. Yeah.
So I went through this. So I said, okay, where do I need to plug myself in? So we had, where again, referencing Tom Brady. Does Tom Brady have coaches? Does he have counseling? Does he have therapists?
The most.
You're shaking your head. Yeah. For those that are not on video and audio, yes, absolutely. He has all these things, right? And so I was like, all right, well, you know what? Who do I need to surround myself with? Well, that's counseling. Okay, cool. Let's plug ourselves in. Well, so we plugged ourselves into counseling, and we started putting one foot in front of the other. We started learning these things the light was shed on different perspectives, because what you don't know is what you don't know. And if you're trying to do everything on your own, good luck, right? It's a recipe for disaster. So we did biblical counseling, right? And it was related to biblical Christianity counseling. And then that led us to Reengage, which is the 16-week program, which was a phenomenal program. It was something I'd never done in my entire 30 plus years of my life, but being around, other individuals that were going through the same thing, and we all go through it, right? One way, shape, or form, whether you're delusional about it or not, right? And so once we got into these environments and we all wanted to improve our marriages, we were going through the curriculum. It was funny because 2 months in, I was like, oh man, we do this pretty good. And you're reflecting and you're dissecting things. And then we got to the place of communication and active listening. And me and Kendra both looked at each other. We were so engaged. We're like, this is what we've been looking for this entire time.
Beautiful.
And, and so we dove deep on that, and we worked on that, and we did the homework, we did the exercises. And still to this day, we're intentional about it. And we implore some of these strategies and tips and tricks. But,
I noticed Kendra has changed as a person since you guys going to that. Like and I want to say it was since you guys did that, like, she seems so much calmer and trusting and loving towards you. And like you said, big personality, bold, strong person, right? And for you to be able to get her to a place of security and safety, it was beautiful. It's amazing. And that's leadership, right? And she obviously had to put all the work in herself too. But man, it was a beautiful thing to watch. And it's funny because you guys already had a great relationship going into that.
Mm.
re-engaged, right? And so a lot of the couples there were really struggling. You guys weren't really struggling. You were going there to level up
Correct.
even more. You were like, okay, where else can we get awesome, right? And so you still discovered some things, right? Like which we will be discovering things when we're 80, right? Married to our spouses for 80. We're still going to be trying to get better. You're not done, right? It's all, it takes forever. So I just think that was yeah, just commend you for both of you guys for doing that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that, man. It was interesting because we went into the re-engage, and there was actually we said we were like everybody's like, well, what do you went around, you filled out this questionnaire, and one of the things, there was a lot of things that they were asking about. I mean, some of it was pretty intense stuff, right? Like
Mm,
betrayal and affairs and all this other stuff, and we're like,
mm,
we haven't done any of these, and so we were like, what's our place here? And we felt really out of place. And so there was another couple in there that kind of said the same thing. We're like, oh, our marriage is great. In my mind, I'm like, well, I'd never say our marriage is great, right? Because the way my mindset works, and if you're listening to this, level up and live, right? What to me, that means like it's never going to be perfect. It's never a destination. We are evolving human beings. Your wife, myself, we're all evolving.
yeah,
Who you married 15 plus years ago, Kelly Heinemeyer,
yeah,
is not the same person.
totally
It's not the
different.
same individuals. You are not the same person. Me and Kendra are not
Mm,
the same. So we are evolving. We are adjusting our personalities, our temperaments. Everything is changing. So if
mm,
you're saying, and this was me, if I'm saying that, yeah, everything's good, everything's great, then that's a complacency mindset.
yeah.
And I know in order for me to continue to level up and live my best life and become the best version of myself, I will have to always, for the next 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years until I'm dead, be able to plug myself into church, married life, programs like this, and continuing to be intentional, because that's my North Star. That's my purpose, is to become the best version of myself. I will never be perfect because I am evolving. You are an
Mm.
evolving human being that is listening to this, myself included. So we have to continue to plug ourselves into those environments.
You can almost assume every decade, probably a lot more than that, probably over 5 years, but every decade at minimum, 20, going to be different. 30, you're going to be different than when you were 20. 40, you're going to be different than when you were when you're 30. 50, you can just imagine in your mind, there's no way you're going to be the same at 50 as you were at 40. 60, you're just going to be different. 70. So if that's safe to say, then yeah, what you're saying, you've got to keep expecting that things will shift, right? Our hormones change, our experiences, things that happen to us, age, wisdom, right? All those things happen. And so, yeah, we're going to be different people. And man, but I tell you, I know married couples that have been married for 30, 40, 50 years, bickering, still bickering. One of the things I can see when a wife, like a 50, 60-year-old wife, the husband says something and the wife will almost do like a snap, like a and you can all see them bickering in public, like, and they're trying not to show it, but there's an underlying lack of communication, not been working on that. Like, why
Yes.
would it erupt so quickly? I saw it was a while ago. A couple I know, and I think they're late 60s, early 70s, and they mentioned something about directions, and he was like, "No, it's to the right." She's like, "No, it's like this," and it was like sharp, violent kind of words. And I was like, "Whoa, that's got nothing to do with the directions, man."
Yeah. Yeah.
There is some frustration behind their communication, So
Yes.
I was like, I don't ever want that. I don't ever want to. If I'm bickering, if my wife ever acts like that, I know I got work to do. I'm I'm
Yes.
I'm causing that. That's a reaction from something I've been doing, and I need to go figure it out. Right? I'm the leader. It's on me to figure that out. Right? Which that comes to our third point, empathy. Which I'll say, like you said, hey, well, I'm not great at that, and so I'll ask you some questions. But I think, like we said, you've worked on it. It's hard for you, and you've actively seek to be empathetic, which I think like it's super commendable, because if you're not something, it's very difficult to become that, and you're very self aware, and so I
Yes.
think that's yeah. What is empathy to you? Like if you were to put it into words.
For me, it's about it's about being empathetic, right? And so the first word that I put in my mind is like, okay, I need to put myself in their shoes right now. I need to be understanding. And that's one of the things it's always been like in the past, my way or the highway, right? And so,
Mm,
which I know where that got me, it was unfulfilled, I've already shared that on previous episodes, but empathetic is like, okay, not everybody's Sean Myers. You and Heinemeier is not even Sean Myers. Not everybody's this guy. And so empathy is allowing me to go slow to go fast, put myself in the other person's shoes and understand where they're coming from. Now, here's the thing. My temperament, my personality, the way I show up every single day, my strengths, I know who I am. And empathy is something that I have to work on so freaking hard, right? It's like going into my kitchen. If there's a donut in there, if I am not like willpower, I'm done. I'm eating that donut, right?
Hmm.
So I have to put systems and processes in place for empathy. And what I mean by that is that if I know that I struggle with empathy because I'm a like, whether that's a trigger, whether that's a snap of a finger, whether that's I react really quick. I make decisions really quick. I react really quick. And what I mean by that is in the past I have. Now I take my time. I'm like, okay, before what comes out of your mouth right now, put yourself in their shoes. Prime
Mm.
example, me and you going into the high rocks, right?
Hmm.
I have to continually be intentional. Like Ewan hasn't been training like I have for the last 3 years. I need to put myself in his shoes. I need to be empathetic and be careful, be cautious on what I say, because I could push him beyond,
I
what
felt
it
it.
is.
I felt that, and I felt it, and it was a huge impact for me because I knew you were doing it. Like I knew you were being empathetic because I could feel it. You
Very
were,
tough.
and I tell you, it made me want to walk across glass, right?
Ooh.
As opposed to the other version of that, it's like if the opposite of empathetic, you're thinking from your perspective. A guy's thinking from
Yes.
his perspective with the wife, like, no, you need to be X,
Yes.
but then that wouldn't work, right? Because then it's not coming from a place, they're not doing it out of their decision or their love. But when you open that space, you create a space for me to be free, and it made
Yes.
me want to push harder, right? So
Yes.
it's like the opposite of what you do gets you the opposite of what you want, right?
Well said.
And
Well
that's true
said.
for everyone. That's true for me in all kinds of areas. Like there's countless areas where I'm like, oh, if I do this, I'm gonna get that, and I don't want that. I want this, so I need to do that, right? So, and it takes self discipline, right? It takes control, system, process, and reps, lots and lots of reps. And so, yeah, commend you for that, dude, because I know it meant the world to me that you were that for me on that day.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks
Yeah.
for that. Leading into our fourth and final one is not is the forgiveness, right? So, what I have some thoughts on that. What are your thoughts on forgiveness? So,
Yeah, man. I think it starts with communication, right? So there's nothing happens without communication except bad things, right? Because if you don't communicate, nothing goes anywhere. You actively listen in the communication side of things. You have empathy, so you're understanding their perspective, and to encompass all of that, right? Because there's going to be things that we do wrong, we messed up, and if we don't forgive, what's the opposite of forgiveness? Grudges, right?
yeah,
Like you're
within, yeah,
holding on, and that is drinking the poison, hoping your enemy dies, right? And so for me, forgiveness is whatever it is. You have to forgive them because you need forgiveness too
yeah, 100%.
for all the things that you might have done, right? That we don't want to admit to, or that we can be like, well, there was a reason behind me doing that. I can justify the things that I've done, right? But I'm going to hold them accountable. I'm going to I'll not forgive them until we've squeezed, until they suffer, until they know, till they've earned, some kind of forgiveness. And everything I just said right there, how could that be a beautiful thing? How is that a space for someone to thrive and be the best version of themselves? How are you creating a space to level somebody else up? Well, it starts with forgiveness, right? We all need it. So we all need to be giving it. And it's not a forgive and forget, right? Like it's not
Right.
like you don't allow people to continue to abuse, but it's forgiveness from the perspective of this is what has happened. It's too late, right? That thing has happened. What am I going to do? What options do I have? What way can I be that's going to make this better, right? Like for all parties involved. And so I think forgiveness is just so huge, and trust, connection, and bonding really comes from forgiveness, and that really allows you to level up together as a couple. That's what forgiveness is to me. What about you?
Yeah, I love that. And one of the words that I heard you say and that I received was trust, right? And
Hmm.
so to me, I think there's a fine line, right? It's like you said, not forgetting, but also forgiveness, right? Because so many times, like I feel like in my own life, and I'm talking to myself, is that sometimes we're repeat offenders, right? And this can be
Yep.
anything, right? Somebody that shows up late. If they're showing up late, what's the trend? What's the track
Yeah.
record? They're
Yeah.
showing up late in other places. And so if there is a repeat offender, how often are you asking yourself for forgiveness? Is it for the same thing? Because if so, there's going to be trust broken there because of the track record. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
And so I think it's important to be intentional and be aware of that. And
So
I'm
I mean, you
talking to
can't allow
myself.
abusive. You can't because that would
Yeah,
be forgiving, and because then a husband that is cruel to his wife and she just keeps forgiving him. Well, that wouldn't be right. You know what I mean? And vice versa. A woman is mean and harsh with her husband, and he just continues to let her do it. Oh, I'll just forgive her. That's not productive, right? That's not going
exactly.
anywhere. That's
Exactly.
encouraging bad behavior, right? It's
Yes.
encouraging the relationship to go south, and that's not what anybody wants. So yeah, forgiveness is not just letting people do whatever they want.
Right.
It's a very specific, structured um, giving of energy, right? Like I'm going to stop feeling this way about what it is that you have done. I'm going to stop that, and I'm going to allow myself to forgive you, and that should open up a space on their end to not do that again,
Yeah.
right?
Prime example is like there's been times where like me and Kendra will be in environments like with our friends or our community or team members. And then again, going back to knowing ourselves, knowing oneself is we are strong personalities. I understand Kendra, like she's a very strong personality woman. And she just basically says what's on her mind, right? She's not being intentional. She's not being in spite to try to embarrass me. But there's been things in the past where I'm like, deep down inside, I'm like, that just embarrassed me. Right.
Yeah.
Like I didn't want
Yeah.
people to know that around me. And so I would
Yes.
talk to her behind the scenes and I'd be like, hey, just want to let you know I'm struggling with this. And I hope, moving forward, this is how it made me feel. And so we'll talk about it, we'll work through it. And it automatically, this is where the forgiveness, right? And
Dude,
so
that's a masterclass that you just said right there. I hope people are listening to that. What you just said, it's so easy to brush over that, but either people's jaws dropped hearing that, or they just totally whiffed. But you go to your wife after the fact and say, "Hey, I am struggling with this, and I'm just letting you know." And she says, "Okay, great. I didn't know that. Thanks for
didn't know
letting me
that. Didn't know
know,
that. Yep.
and that won't happen again. Thanks for
Yes.
letting me know." As opposed to you blah blah bleep bleep, how could you to me, don't
Yes.
ever do that again or you will suffer, right? Where's that relationship going? Who's leveling
South.
up there, who's feeling good, so kudos, and yes, that right there, if people could work towards doing that more, gold.
Amen. Fifth and final one is one of my favorite ones is support their goals, right? So if you can get all these four, then you're on your way of becoming the best version of yourself, the best spouse, and then more fulfilling, more happy life, right? Because like you said earlier, I'll be completely transparent, man. When things are good, when things are great, when we're working on our marriage, when we're being intentional about it, we're plugging ourselves into these environments, dude. Like it allows me to come alive, and I share this from time to time, social media outlets, and I even preach it. And so supporting their goals, that's just the cherry on top, right? If my wife has an event, DECA, or she's got a High Rocks event or whatever it may be, show up for them.
Yeah.
I know people in my lives, I know people in my life that, acquaintances and just watching their actions, right? And they don't show up for each other.
Mm.
And I'm sitting here scratching my head. I'm like, man, you're going to be with this person the rest of your life, right? And so I don't spend a lot of time on that. I spend a lot of time dissecting my own life. I'm like, okay, well, I want to because I learn from other people, right? I learn from mistakes and what not to do. And so I'm like, I want to show up for everything for my wife. And I'll give a quick story just for press for time, and I'll let you in with the support the goals. My wife, she spends a lot of time, energy, and effort being a DECA advisor and leader at her school in the Woodlands High School. And she spends so much time, energy, and effort, right? Not even focused on the money. She's focused on impacting and serving these kids. She spends so much time, energy, and effort with the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, right? Like for instance, here recently they just did a banquet, and she asked me, she's like, "Hey, do you want to come to the banquet?" And for the last however long she's been at the Woodlands High School, half a dozen years, every single year I've been there. I've shown up. I've sponsored. I've done everything I've possibly can. Not just like, yeah, babe, great job. I'm going to support your goals. I got you from behind the scenes. No. What are Sean's actions?
Yeah.
Right? What is he actually doing? I've sponsored DECA. I've shown up. I've supported her. I've had conversations with her. I've listened to her in the ups and the downs. And I've hired some of her decade students so they could come and intern. So to me, that is what is all about as a man, as a husband, to support your wife's goals. Like, what are your actions? There's a difference between what you say and what you do. Be in action, support their goals, show up. If they have a competition, if they have an event at their school, whatever it may be, plug yourself in, show up when you don't feel like it. But that's what's going to help level you up, as a husband.
And what you're saying there, man, we're saying support their goals. That means, and everything you just described is being selfless.
Yeah.
To support their goals, that means you'd have to stop thinking about yourself for just a second to think about what's going on over there with them. Had to give up your time to go be there because you could have been doing something else that you like to do, right? And that is beautiful, man. And yeah, I think to sum it up for me on the support the goals would be that it's the outward expression of love, right? It's the outward expression of selflessness, right? That's how you know if someone loves you or not, right? That's how you know their words are true. It's when they give up what's good for them, what they want, for your sake, your benefit, right? And I think that's just the like you said, cherry on top. It's beautiful to be able to do that. And why do we say all this today? All these 5 points: communication, active listening, empathy, forgiveness, support their goals. It takes a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of self reflection, a lot of reality checks, right? And I'm talking to myself too, right? But what do you get? What do you get at the end of all this? You get this relationship with your wife that's not just surface level. Oh, man and wife do things together. This is heaven on earth, paradise, right? When you have that connection, that trust with your wife, it's worth it.
Yeah.
So
awesome, man.
On that note, level up and live.
Thanks for tuning in to Level Up and Live podcast. If you found today's episode valuable, make sure to subscribe to the podcast for more insights on personal growth and relationships. Leave us a review. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook for daily inspiration. And share this episode with a friend who's ready to strengthen their relationship. Remember, your partner is not just number one. They're your teammate on this journey called life. Level up and live.